Hare Krishna, everyone. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We'll be reading from Canto 2, verse 2. Canto 2, chapter 2, verse 25 and verse 26. We begin with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. So again, Canto 2, chapter 2, verse 25. If folks want to follow along. Tad Vishwa Nabhim Tva Ativarti Vishnor Aniyasa Virajenat Manaikaha Namaskritam Brahma Vedam Upaiti Kalpayusu Yad Vibudha Ramante. Word for word. Tat, that. Vishwanabhim, navel of the universal personality of Godhead. Tu, but. Ativartya, crossing over. Vishnu, of Lord Vishnu, the personality of Godhead. Aniyasa, due to mystic perfection. Virajena, by the purified. Atmana, by the living entity. Eka, alone. Namaskritam, worshipable. Brahma Vidam, by those who are transcendentally situated. Upaiti, reaches. Kalpa Ayusha, a period of 4,300,000,000 solar years. Yat, the place. Vibudha, self-realized souls. Ramante, do enjoy. Translation. The Shishumara is the pivot for the turning of the complete universe, and it is called the navel of Vishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. The yogi alone goes beyond the circle of Shishumara and attains the planet Maharloka, where purified saints like Bhrigu enjoy a duration of life of 4.3 trillion solar years. This planet is worshipable even for saints who are transcendentally situated. I'll read the next verse also. Verse 20, again, Canto 2, chapter 2, verse 26. Atonantasya mukhanalena dandayam manam sanirikshya vishvam niryati siddheshvara yushtadhishnyam yadvai parardhyam tadu pramirtishyam parameshtyam. Word for word. Ato, thereupon. Anantasya, of Ananta, the resting incarnation of Godhead. Mukha analena, by the fire emanating from his mouth. Dandahyamanam, burning to ashes. Sa, he. Niriksha, by seeing this. Vishwam, the universe. Niryati, goes out. Siddheshvara yushtadhishnyam, airplanes used by the great purified souls. Yath, the place. Dvai parardhyam, many solar years. Tat, that. You, the exalted. Parameshtyam, Satyaloka, where Brahma resides. Translation. At the time of the final devastation of the complete universe, the end of the duration of Brahma's life, a flame of fire emanates from the mouth of Ananta, from the bottom of the universe. The yogi sees all the planets of the universe burning to ashes, and thus he leaves for Satyaloka by airplanes used by great purified souls. The duration of life in Satyaloka is calculated to be, I don't know how to pronounce this number correctly, but many years. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is indicated herein that the residents of Maharloka were the purified living entities or demigods possess a duration of life calculated to be 4.3 trillion years, solar years, have airships by which they reach Satyaloka, the topmost planet of the universe. In other words, the Srimad Bhagavatam gives us many clues about other planets far, far away from us, which modern planes and spacecraft cannot reach, even by imaginary speeds. The statements of Srimad Bhagavatam are accepted by great acharyas like Sridhar Swami, Ramanujacharya, and Vallabhacharya. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically accepts Srimad Bhagavatam as the spotless Vedic authority, and as such, no sane man can ignore the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam when it is spoken by the self-realized soul, Srila Sukadeva Goswami, who follows in the footsteps of his great father, Srila Vyasadeva, in the compiler of all Vedic literatures. In the creation of the Lord, there are many wonderful things we can see with our own eyes every day and night, but we are unable to reach them equipped by modern materialistic science. We should not therefore depend on the fragmentary authority of materialistic science for knowing things beyond the range of scientific purview. For a common man, both modern science and Vedic wisdom are simply to be accepted because none of the statements, either modern science or Vedic literature, can be verified by him. The alternative for a common man is to believe either of them or both of them. The Vedic way of understanding, however, is more authentic because it has been accepted by the acharyas, who are not only faithful and learned men, but also liberated souls without any flaws of the conditioned souls. The modern scientists, however, are conditioned souls liable to so many errors and mistakes. Therefore, the safe side is to accept the authentic version of the Vedic literature, like Srimad Bhagavatam, which is accepted unanimously by the great acharyas. Okay. So this is, again, Canto 2, Chapter 2, verse 25 and verse 26. Just to give some overall background on what's happening here. So this is Sukadeva Goswami, right, telling Parikshit Maharaj. The chapter is entitled, I think, "The Lord in the Heart," specifically. So in this, the Lord in the Heart. So in this section, in this chapter, he's talking about this path where yogis are traveling through the planets. He actually discerns the path of a mystic yogi versus a person who's trying to aspire for Krishna. He discerns those two paths, and so he's sort of talking about the path that a mystic yogi might take. And the distinction he makes up, he brings up earlier in this chapter, is that a mystic yogi, for example, there's someone that has some sense of material desires, like to enjoy the higher planetary systems. There's some desire there, so the path there is slightly different. Where a mystic yogi versus a person who has spiritual desires, basically. So in the verse 225 and 226 specifically, what he's talking about is he's talking about this. I'll share a chart of the Vedic planetary system, but he's describing the path of this mystic yogi. It goes to this specific pivot in here. Let me share my screen. Sorry, 1 second. Are devotees able to see my screen? Anyone give a thumbs up? I assume so.
Yeah, you can see it, Prabhu.
Okay. Yeah. So in this what I'm sharing, you can see, so it describes that we're here. This is the Earth planet. It's labeled as a middle planet. Then you have the lower planetary systems, and then you have the higher planets over here. And we read about Maharloka in the verses, and this is actually not the full picture. I don't know if you've seen the painting, but above this bubble, basically, it shows Vaikuntha, the abode of Krishna. So what we're seeing is literally one of the universes, right? There's, as you can tell, there's many universes, many bubbles essentially that are popping up, that are coming out of Krishna, and there's universe in each of them. Like this is just one universe amongst unlimited universes. We're just a speck on this earth. So, and this Mahamantra representation is showing that if you do bhakti yoga and you're seeking your only spiritual desires, you can bypass all these planetary systems and go straight to Krishna, versus the path of the mystic yogi, which is what these two verses are talking about in specific. So if I just show you the verse again. So in verse 25, it says, the yogi alone goes beyond the circle of Shishimara and attains the planet of Maharloka, which is right here, right? So we're here. It says that, this mystic yogi can attain the path of Maharloka. And it's saying that, hey, on that planet, you live for 4.3 trillion years, right? At times. And it's saying, but, this planet is also there for people who are transcendentally situated, but it's not the ideal destination, basically. And then the next verse that we just read, it talks about when the final devastation happens, that flame of fire comes from Ananta and everything starts burning away. And the yogi sees everything burning here. And what happens is then the yogi goes from Maharloka to Satyaloka, which is Lord Brahma's abode. It's the highest abode in this material universe, so to speak. And the duration there, is it's massive in terms of how many years you end up living there. So you're going from planet to planet, but you're not reaching Krishna exactly. So that's the picture that Sukadeva Goswami is painting in these two verses. Again, you're here and you're making hops to these lokas. They're labeled as higher planets, but they're not Vaikuntha, versus if you do bhakti yoga, we go straight to Vaikuntha. So I hope that this picture is helpful. It's showing that. There's some interesting points that Srila Prabhupada made in this second purport that we just read, though, which I thought were interesting. He starts speaking about the power of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? It's beginning with the fact that he says there are many things we can't see with our eyes. What I just showed everyone, this chart, these are things we cannot see with our eyes, that there's so many planets, there's so many universes. And so Bhagavatam gives us clues about these other planets far, far away, which modern planes can't reach. You can't take a flight there, right? And so Prabhupada is making this point that we, with our eyes, we can only see limited things, but look, there's so many things that are mentioned in the Bhagavatam that we can't even imagine of. And so Prabhupada makes that point that we shouldn't depend on materialistic science for knowing things that are beyond the range of scientific purview. Like if our scientists discover something, that's great, but doesn't mean that's everything. Whatever we don't know, we can't rely on this scientific knowledge. And so Prabhupada says, for a common man, both modern science and Vedic wisdom are simply to be accepted, because none of the statements in either modern science or Vedic literature can be verified. Like, if when we read science or the evidence that's presented in there, or Vedic wisdom, even for that matter, we can't necessarily go and prove, like, we can't verify those things. So the common man should accept both of them. Forget a devotee, forget a advanced devotee. The common man has to accept both those things. They shouldn't just accept one, only scientific science, or the other. That's the point that Prabhupada started to get into. So he's talking about the power of Srimad Bhagavatam, and then he makes another point, which is the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam are accepted by the great acharyas like Sridhar Swami Ramanujacharya. He gives many examples of those acharyas, and he says the reason is because those acharyas weren't just faithful, but they were liberated souls that made it back to Godhead without any flaws of conditioned souls. He compares that to modern scientists, who are conditioned souls and they're liable to so many errors. And then he finally qualifies that this is spoken by Sukadeva Goswami, who follows in the footsteps of his great father, Srila Vyasadeva. So in general, like the Prabhupada is saying, one should read Bhagavatam because, look, we can't see everything with our eyes. So Bhagavatam has that information. And two, they're accepted by the great acharyas. And he gives the names of all those acharyas. And the one thing I'll say is that on this part, these acharyas are, verified, successful people. Scientists are also very successful. But you can study by the qualities of the acharyas and how their path has progressed to see they're not just believers of Bhagavatam. They live and breathe it, and you can see the result of that. And so Prabhupada is speaking to that. and sort of the topic I wanted to take this into was the importance of studying scripture. And Prabhupada talks about that in the purport. There's so many verses and chapters on Vedic astronomy and how it works. I'm not experienced at it at all, but it's amazing how much Bhagavatam reveals in that area. Like, there's so much information on that topic. We just read 2 verses about that today. And so it's extremely important to study scripture to get that full view of it. And so it's important to study scripture, not just to understand Vedic, the Vedic cosmology and all that, but that is the only way we're getting knowledge. And Prabhupada gives evidence of that. He says, out of all the devotional activities we do, studying scriptures is one of the crucial ways to learn about what we can't see with our eyes and understand the why. Chanting and kirtan may not necessarily do that, but Bhagavatam can open up our vision and horizon and see the full picture, of course, along with hearing. So reading scripture tells you what we can't see and the why behind it. So he stresses that. And if you just taking a moment to appreciate Srila Prabhupada on that perspective, if you look at his life, his later years when he was preaching, he spent a lot of time writing his books, right? He would refer to Acharya's commentaries, put them into the purport. He would do it at night. He was so dedicated to leave for the US and like getting the scripture out there was one of his primary focuses. It wasn't all about preaching and all about kirtan and building temples. Books was a main thing, and not just from a book distribution perspective, but this core principle that scriptures should be read by people so they can understand the why. of what they can't see beyond the eyes. That was crucial for him in his journey. And it says that he says, Srimad Bhagavatam is essential for us to reach the goal of human life, to end the cycle of birth and death, and then attain this pure loving service to Krishna. In this section of Bhagavatam where Prahlad Maharaj is speaking, right? He was sent to the material world to give teachings in the way of life, pure devotion. Like Prahlad Maharaj had a purpose in that entire pastime of the Hiranyakashipu and Nrsimha pastime, but he was specifically sent to the material world to give teachings, to provide these teachings in the way of life of pure devotion. That was one of the purposes that Prahlad Maharaj was meant to fulfill, was to give these teachings. And so Yudhishthira Maharaj is hearing about this description of Prahlad Maharaj from Narada Muni. Narada Muni is telling Yudhishthira Maharaj, hey, Prahlad Maharaj had this purpose to, give these teachings on how to lead a life of pure devotion. And so Yudhishthira Maharaj asks Narada Muni, okay, that's amazing, but how do I get there? How do I get to this way of life of pure devotion that you're talking about, that Prahlad Maharaj did? What's the process to get there? And so Narada Muni responds to Yudhishthira Maharaj and says, look, before coming to Shuddha Bhakti, or this pure stage, you have to first become a human being, which is interesting. Like, Narada Muni is saying, hey, before you even talk about this pure stage, you have to become like a human being to begin with. So even Narada Muni is talking about the fundamentals here, and so Narada Muni describes to Yudhishthira Maharaj what these qualities are of being a human being specifically. And let me pull up that verse. It's there's a point that I want to make there. I'll share my screen. So these are the qualities that that he describes, right? So these are the general principles to be the translation. This is verse Canto 7, chapter 11, verses 8 through 12. If anyone wants to look it up, but these are where the qualities of a human being are described. And so, translation: these are the general principles to be followed by all human beings: truthfulness, mercy, austerity, bathing twice a day, tolerance, discrimination between right and wrong, control of the mind, control of the senses, nonviolence, celibacy, charity, reading of scripture, simplicity, satisfaction, rendering service to the saintly persons, gradually taking leave of unnecessary engagements, observing the futility of unnecessary activities of the human society, remaining silent and grave and avoiding unnecessary talk, considering whether one is the body or the soul, distributing food equally to all living entities, seeing every soul as a part of the Supreme Lord, hearing about the activities and instructions given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, chanting about these activities and instructions, always remembering these activities and instructions, trying to render service, performing worship, offering obeisances, becoming a servant, becoming a friend, and surrendering one's whole self. O King Yudhishthira, these 30 qualifications must be acquired in the human form of life. Simply by acquiring these qualifications, one can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So one of the qualities that he talks about, it's the Sanskrit for that is swadhyaya. Trying to find that, and that literally means studying scripture. So when Narada Muni describes those fundamental human qualities, he refers, look, studying scripture is one of them that he's telling Yudhishthira Maharaj. And if we can't do that on a regular basis, then we cannot see or understand what is beyond our eyes. We only see what's in front of our eyes. And so and without that, you can't practice a life of devotion, is what Narada Muni is telling Yudhishthira Maharaj. separately in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna starts talking about, he mentions, right, the purpose of the Vedas is to know me. So the purpose of the scriptures is to know Krishna. And so even the Bhagavad Gita is teaching the ways of devotional service, because you can only know Krishna through devotional service. And so even though we're, there's sort of a sequence of things. If we're trying to achieve Krishna, you have to practice devotional service. You have to practice devotional service, you have to know the Vedas, the scriptures to get there. Now, there's one thing, which is, even though we're sort of getting this, let's say we're trying to develop this knowledge, where we're reading scripture, there are still these residual tendencies that we have, that are just hard to leave, right? We're reading scripture, we're developing ourselves now, but some residual things are just there. They're hard to leave, and that comes from the seed of material enjoyment. These residual things that are left there. And so in the Gita in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse 11, Krishna says specifically in this verse, the verse Tesham evanu kampartam aham agyatam jam tamaha ashyami atma bhavasto gnana dipena bhashvata. Translation: to show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So Krishna says, these residual tendencies that people have, even though they're practicing with knowledge, he destroys that darkness of ignorance with the lamp of knowledge. So again, that the eradication of those residual tendencies is done by knowledge, which comes from, again, studying scripture. And so it's sort of the point again that Prabhupada is making here is, you can again develop that sadhana practice, Krishna consciousness, but even to get rid of those residual tendencies, only knowledge can help combat that. And that verse that I read helps state that. And so Prabhupada stresses, then he talks about having the importance of then developing faith in scripture, right? Prabhupada used to emphasize like the importance of having faith in scripture. That's the way this process of bhakti yoga comes. And so if you think back to the original, the discussion where it began, where Vidusha Maharaj is asking Narada Muni, how do I achieve this life of pure devotion? Narada Muni says you have to develop these 30, you have to be a human being. Here, studying scripture is one of them, but then from there's other benefits, such as getting rid of those residual tendencies, and developing that process of bhakti yoga, right? So that's the power of studying scripture. Again, the verse spoke about Vedic cosmology, and it's just wonderful to appreciate what the Bhagavatam was illuminating there that we wouldn't know otherwise. I'll end with the story, but there's a story of, in Sri Rangam, when Lord Chaitanya went to Sri Rangam for a period of time in his travel to South India, and he would visit this deity of Ranganath every day. And when he would go visit this deity of Ranganath every day, he would see this Brahmana crying by the entrance in that area every day. And so finally one day Mahaprabhu asked this Brahmana, what's making you cry? And the Brahmana said, don't tease me. And Lord Chaitanya said, no, generally I'm trying to understand why are you crying? Why are you crying? And the Brahmana said, I'm illiterate. I don't know how to read. my spiritual master had instructed me to read every day, but I'm not able to read. And all these other scholars come and tease me, they make fun of me that I'm not able to read. So Mahaprabhu, when you asked that question, I thought you were teasing me. And then Mahaprabhu said, actually, you have the true scholar. You're the true scholar of the Bhagavad Gita because you have so much faith in it, and you have so much desire to read it. You are actually the true scholar because you have so much faith in scripture. And so that having that desire to be well versed in scripture is a good starting point to then actually try to understand it. So yeah, I just wanted to summarize it with that, along with our other practices, the importance of studying scriptures is extremely important. I felt like these verses at least gave me that appreciation and reinstated the importance of that. I'll stop here if other devotees would like to add anything or have any comments.
Thank you, Prabhu. Waiting for others. I think one point, the importance of studying the scriptures. So, you mentioned it. When Prabhupada was talking about it, reveals the things that we can't understand with our own senses. Even in this, what we are just reading, right, in this section, it's very, very kind of very technical and little difficult to comprehend as well, right? Unless one hears study the scriptures and hears, then we don't understand that, okay, yeah, this is what we see, it is there. We can't understand beyond what is there. So within our whole limited whole, right, like that, the Dr. Frog story Prabhupada tells. So thank you, Prabhu. So yeah, it's very, very important. Other than other processes are important, but yeah, the studying the scriptures is the one which at least keeps us it reveals more, right? More and more. We will be able to connect better with the process. So, the chanting, everything is important, but yeah, so that all those things get solidified by studying the scriptures.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear from devotees. What are some struggles that you all encounter when trying to study scripture? If any, I'm curious. I think we can end here, Prabhu. We can pick up tomorrow again.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. I think, yeah, for me, the main thing is maybe what you call, not the time is always there for everybody. So it's actually kind of the motivational support. If we have some kind of friends to help each other, so it always that's how I felt it is little easy to do than our own, right? So like for example, these reading groups are going on right now. I'm sure many of us might not be able to do on individually, right, reading the like an hour a day or whatever it is.
Yeah.
As a group, many of the devotees are able to do. So thank you, Prabhu.
Appreciate you, Akhanda Nama Prabhu, trying to get an interactive discussion, but in the morning, devotees don't speak.
Yeah, I know. I actually had a list of discussion questions that I wanted to ask devotees because, but yeah, I understand. It's yeah.
Yeah.
Very well, Prabhu.
Good luck with that.
That is very nice. Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please
Hare
accept
Krishna.
my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Sri Guru and Gauranga. That picture that you showed was very nice, Prabhu. Usually, the main difficulty is, having a visual, that's not, so that very picture that you showed, it speaks so much, So I had one little question about that, which is very downright silly, I think, but may I ask that one? Because in my head, what is sticking is that all these planets are within the stem of the lotus. So your picture shows that stem going through kind of, it's around the stem, So I was wondering if, if the stem is so huge that it accommodates all the universes within that stem, or do you have any comments on that one? Thank you.
I don't, Mataji. I'm the weakest in this in Vedic cosmology completely. I don't. If anyone else has.
But you are giving very good classes, Prabhu.
No.
Thank you so much.
My memory of this picture is we used to go to Premananda Mataji's house for Sunday afternoon classes. Like all the kids always used to go. And in her deity room, she has a giant picture where it has the entire planetary system. I'm just showing you a small part of it.
Yes, I remember that.
I don't know if everyone knows. She's a giant, So that's always stuck with me.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Akhanda Nama Prabhuji, wonderful, discussion in the morning. I was also wondering about the picture that you showed, However, before expressing my opinion, I just want to respond to Sandhya Mataji's question. I think these pictures are only representative of the concept and they're not actual. So, sometimes we'll have to adjust our view because, like you said, the Shastra provides us a tool through which we can see certain things, which actually leads to the point I wanted to make. When we look at these pictures, they clearly represent the concept that Srimad Bhagavatam or the scriptures are trying to show us. However, when we look at, the telescopes, be it the Hubble or whatever else that they have launched in recent times, with all that in-depth information, they're piecing together millions and millions of these pictures, stitching them and all those things. However, that meta-level information, is still not visible to the scientist. So, so that is where I think the scriptures are so different from material science, where material science cannot reach to that level where they can understand what something like Srimad Bhagavatam is preaching. That's all, Prabhuji. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for sharing, Prabhu.
Actually, the way you can, this is for your preaching purpose, the way we can explain this is the sphere. There's a sphere, right? And if we see a sphere on a 2D diagram, what does it look like?
Like a circle, Prabhu.
Circle. Yeah. So a circle is representing a sphere. But the circle is missing a dimension, which is the third dimension. So similarly, the scriptures or the Srimad Bhagavatam is showing a picture of a much higher or multiple dimensions that we don't have access to. And we are trying to see those in a 3D format. So a sphere in a circular, as a circle, is not an incorrect representation, but it is not a full representation. So similarly, when we see through telescopes and through our material senses, what we see is an incomplete representation, but not a false representation, but there is more reality beyond it, which we don't have access to.
Thank you, Prabhu. That is a very nice explanation. What my mind is, it is so mind-boggling to think that the dimension of that lotus stem is containing all these material universes. That is what my mind is stuck to think. Oh, the lotus stem itself is so, I mean, it's a spherical or 3D representation. Is it so huge? What are we, trying to imagine? I mean, trying to understand. I feel stuck there, that's all. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna. Yeah, it is the planar representation. It is not the 3D or even higher dimensions we have to think of.
Just
Hare
to
Krishna.
add to that, it's not even just one stem, it's unlimited material universes that are resting like this on the stem. Yeah, so it's definitely mind-boggling. Yeah.
Yes, it's mind-boggling.
What picture did you show?
This one, Prabhu. This one.
That's a stem inside a universe.
Yeah, this is inside this material universe, as I understand it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like this particular, yeah. And you'll see all the other ones also, right?
Yes, yes.
Every universe has that. Yeah.
I thought you said, or someone said that the stem has all the universes. I think you meant the planets. Okay, yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation.